the Lord. He has done marvelous things. Praise the Lord. He has done marvelous things. Praise the Lord.
As I travel through life with its trouble and strife, I've a glorious hope to give cheer on the way. Soon my toil will be o'er, and I'll rest on that shore where the night has been turned into day. Up in the beautiful paradise valley by the side of the river of life. Up in the valley, the wonderful valley, will be free from all pain and all strain and all strife. There we shall live in the rose-tinted garden, neath the shade of our green tree. How I long for the paradise valley, where the beauty of heaven I'll see. Though your garden is rare, it is not to compare with the flowers that bloom in the garden above. In the midst of it grows Cherry's perfect sweet rose. 'Tis a wonderful flower we love. Up in the beautiful paradise valley by the side of the river of life. Up in the valley, the wonderful valley, will be free from all pain and all strain and all strife. There we shall live in the rose-tinted garden, neath the shade of our green tree. How I long for the paradise valley, where the beauty of heaven I'll see. Father, we love you, we worship and adore you. Glorify thy name in all the earth. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name in all the earth. Jesus, we love you, we worship and adore you. Glorify thy name in all the earth. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name in all the earth. Spirit, we love you, we worship and adore you. Glorify thy name in all the earth. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name in all the earth. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name. Glorify thy name in all the earth. O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. bearing, sent him to die. I scarce can take it in, that on the cross, my burden gladly bearing, he bled and died to take away my sin. When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart? Then I shall bow in humble adoration and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee, how great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee, how great thou art, how great thou art. He bore it all that I might live, in his presence live. My precious Savior suffered pain and agony.
He bore it
Freely bore it all,
that I might
I with him might live. He broke the bonds of sin and set the captive free. He bore it all that I might live.
in his presence live. He bore it
Jesus
all
bore
that
it
I
all.
might see his
Shining face, he bore it
Freely
all,
bore it all.
that I might live.
I with him might live. I stood
condemned to die.
But Jesus
Freely took my place, he bore it all, that I might live.
in his presence live.
They placed a crown of thorns upon my Savior's head.
He bore it
Freely bore it all,
that I might
I with him might live. By cruel man with spear, his side was pierced and bled. He bore it all, that I might
in his presence
live.
live. He bore it
Jesus
all
bore
that
it
I
all.
might see his
See
shine.
his shining.
All right. Well, here's one that I think will tie in as an intro, but also pretty good for Valentine's Day, maybe, with you, you sweethearts, you couples that are out there. There was an older couple, been married 60-plus years. They were sitting out on the porch one beautiful morning, and the husband was he was proud. And the life they've lived and the years together, and he was looking at his wife. And they both had issues with hearing, at their age. And he looked at her and he just said, honey, I'm proud of you. She kind of, turned her head at him and kind of gave him a little bit of not a sour face, but just a what? And he said, I'm proud of you. And she said, what? I'm proud of you. And she said, I'm tired of you too. So, I don't hope that's not with you and yours, but we are going to talk about bitterness. We are going to talk about bitterness. Yeah. So, turn over to Hebrews 12 first. Let's start with this verse here in just a second. Well, let me ask you this. Turn over to Hebrews 12. I think this one we're looking at tonight may be one of Satan's secret weapon that he really, really can use effectively with us. And I think one reason is because we don't see this as being as big of a deal as some of the other things maybe we've talked about or will talk about. Why might that be the case? Why might we have a tendency on this one to kind of minimize bitterness, ill will, grudge holding, that sort of, yeah, Dolores?
We can justify it. We have a reason.
Yes. We have a reason that we believe is justified. And I mean, again, maybe we are justified in being felt that we've been wronged, that we've been hurt. And so this one can be kind of couched in self-righteousness. right? And self-righteousness can be real dangerous, tricky, right? When we think we are entitled and right to do and feel a certain way. Even if what we're doing and feeling and saying, quite frankly, is sinful, right? We can not see that because we are what? Well, I am right in my thinking, in my feeling, in my... Yeah, I'm being truthful. So I have the right to act and say and to be. We wear the badge of I'm right. And that is, quite frankly, with Satan, many of these things he does, it's insidious, it's secretive, it's hidden. Others may come along. By the way, others may come right alongside of us and say, what? You have every right to what? To be bitter. You have, best friends will come alongside you and pat you on the back and say, you don't apologize for feeling that way. Right? Family members will do it. Brothers and sisters in the church will do it. I've seen it. Yeah, keep it up. Don't let go of that grudge. They didn't apologize, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You're right, they're wrong. And all the while, what's Satan doing? Yeah, bitterness. He loves bitterness and all that it's going to be associated with it. So look at Hebrews 12. Look here. Hebrews 12. Someone read Hebrews 12. 14 and 15. Who's got that for us? Okay. Valora?
Pursue peace with all men and the sanctification without which no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, and by it many be defiled. That there be no more immoral or godless person like Esau, who sold his own birthright for a single meal.
Oh, yeah, that's good. So, in the context of Hebrews 12, it's kind of directing Deuteronomy 29. It's a referencing back to that account. And it's dealing with that initially in the Old Testament in that passage, dealing with the root of bitterness that's associated with idolatry. And so even though I don't think that's the context of Hebrews 12, I do think he's applying that to an equally destructive problem. Idolatry is the root of so many problems. And on this one here, he's going to pinpoint the lack of discord, of having discord and not having harmony and conflict among brethren. And he's going to say what's at the center of that, at the heart of that, is this bitterness. And he describes it as a root, right? We've mentioned that before, right? A root, what? First of all, you can't always what? Can't always see it. It's what? It's underground. It's down there. Now, you can sometimes come along and clip the top of of some weeds and then what happens the next day? 2 days later, you come out and what? It's back up. Well, I'll just clip it again, right? Just keep clip. No, you got to do what? Got to get down there. Got to get to the source. You got to get to the problem. And that's how it is. He says this bitterness is it's a root. You've got to eradicate it. You've got to get to the heart of it. And then look at Ephesians 4:31. These two verses are going to they're kind of the foundation of this topic, and then we'll look at a few others. But somebody get Ephesians 4. Get 31 and 32. Who's got that for me? Okay, Dolores. 31 and 32. Yeah.
Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you.
Now, what Paul does on this one is he's going to do a catch-all, is what I call this. He's going to associate bitterness with just about all this negative stuff when it comes to strife and conflict and discord and disharmony. And he kind of uses it to kind of grab a lot of stuff here. And so both of these passages are dealing with a long problem for God's people of dealing with bitterness. Now, the thing about it is, it's kind of always been the case, but certainly no more so evident than today. We live in a time, in a culture, when conflict is glorified. What do I mean by that? Conflict is glorified in our culture. How so? How do you see that? How do we celebrate that? How do we glorify that? Yeah, Matt?
It's glorious to be a contrarian.
Yeah.
If you don't go along with the culture, of course, I consider the church to be counterculture these days.
Sure.
But if you can even agree with a person, but as long as you come across as obstinate and contradictory and, well, no, my opinion's right too, and then you're good.
Where do we see that? Yeah, go ahead, Rhonda.
We're always the weakest when we are not unified.
Right.
And not only does Satan want to take advantage of it in our culture, there are other people or those in power that like that because they can be more powerful
Right.
by keeping us mad at each other
Right.
and upset.
Yeah, it's definitely, let's look at media, right? Media thrives on what? Conflict. Here, cameras in front of you. How do you feel about this? And what do people in those raw emotions and feelings and anger, what do they then spew out? What do they then? All of that stuff, all that bitterness, all that hatred, all that animosity, all that. And again, the tricky part is we talked about, it's couched, it's surrounded by, well, I'm justified. This person has actually wronged me or something's happened. And so now I have the right to get on social media, right? And to just, what? Just dump it all out.
Keyboard warrior.
Just keyboard warrior. Just, and I'm justified because I'm right by what I'm feeling and what's happened. And all the while we just strife and disharmony and discord just festers and grows. And of course, social media has allowed people just instantly just to post and share and to video and to just dump everything on that. Yeah, Matt?
But what's funny about that is they'll say all this garbage online, but they won't dare to say it.
No. Yeah, most will not. Yeah, that is the cowardness of, and that's what Satan is good at, getting people to feel comfortable in doing that. And so our culture is structured around conflict and ratings, and they just laugh to the bank and with this. And so I want to use kind of this phrase. We're going to look at Leviticus 19. So go ahead and turn over to Leviticus 19 now. But I'm going to kind of use this phrase to kind of summarize a lot of what we're talking about. This ill will in the heart. I think that's that I want to use to kind of represent the problem of bitterness. And there's other phrases that kind of manifest the same thing. But this ill will of the heart. Now let's look at Leviticus 19, 18, and 19. Who's got that for us? I'd like to read that. Leviticus 19, 18, 19. Yeah, Jeff?
18 and 19.
Yes, sir. Leviticus 19, 18, and 19. Yep.
Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against one of your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Keep my decrees. Do not make different kinds of animals. Do not plant your field with two kinds of seed. Do not wear clothing woven of two kinds of material.
Okay. So that's going to be a key verse here in just a moment that we're going to come back to here. So this bitterness, this ill will in the heart, we're going to see how it manifested as we looked at these verses here. Let's think about its nature real quick, of what bitterness is, kind of the gravity or the seriousness of it, and then we're going to kind of finish up on some solutions here. But let's think about its its nature here that we see. The thing about Leviticus 19 is there's a range of sins that are listed in this chapter. And they're going to, look here again, Leviticus 19, and look what the two that he mentions here. Do not seek revenge, or what? So, wait a minute. He just puts them both together, right? Now, we would often kind of separate those two, and we'd say, well, seeking revenge is that's a whole nother level. We love movies. Oh, we love them now. You guys, you watch them Westerns, those movies, and what's a big part of the plot? Revenge. Justice, yeah, right. Half the time it's revenge. Justice, revenge, very, very thin line there. And so we see that's a big part of the movie, but, holding a grudge, when have you seen a whole movie plot around that, right? It's not as exciting, but he says both of them, right? You don't, revenge or holding a grudge are both mentioned here in this. And so you see a whole class, and again, this is the same thing in Ephesians 4. Let me read it again real quick. Ephesians 4. Listen to how he kind of just lumps it all in here. That he says here. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, slander, every form of malice. Did we get it all? Just about, didn't we? See, we like to kind of parse things out, don't we? And we like, well, I can have this. I'm not seeking revenge. I'm not trying to, but I want to kind of hold on to a little bit of my grudge. And I'm justified to kind of feel a little bit of this. And Paul here just takes it all and says what? Get what? Get rid of it all. You don't get to hold on to a little bit of your grudge. You don't get to hold on to a little bit of your anger. And people, by the way, when people speak about this, here's how they'll say this. I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. No, I'm not bitter. Anytime you hear that, 9 times out of 10, and I can't say 10 out of 10 because nothing is, but 9 times out of 10, when somebody says, "Now I'm not bitter," they're bitter. But they know what? I shouldn't say I'm, And so, yeah, people they'll try to parse it, and they'll say, "Well, I'm not this." Yeah, but what are you then? I'm always like, if you're not bitter, what are you? Well, I'm angry. Well, I'm not angry. They'll say, I'm just frustrated. Yeah, Matt, you had a...
Valora had her hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Valora.
Well, having a grudge is like having a thorn in your flesh. If you don't get it out, it festers.
Just grows.
And your bitterness.
Yeah.
It's a poison.
Yeah. Does that say back here to Matt, or?
Yeah, I was just going to say the other danger, though, is, okay, so you say you're not angry, but then what happens when you become indifferent?
Yeah.
Because indifference can be the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It can be tempered with anger.
Right.
But how can you, and then the other thing is how can you have vengeance? If you have a grudge, eventually that will lead to some form of vengeance.
Or retaliation. Yeah, right, which is the same thing. Yeah. It's gonna. Now we'll mask it with. It may just be a slight. It may be a dirty look. Maybe I want to embarrass them. I don't want to help. You can what? Boy, you can get even in a lot of ways. Little digs. We become masters of that, don't we? Often. And again, all the while we can say, "No, I'm not bitter. I don't hate them. I don't, and so it's very, very tricky here." Yeah, sometimes you got to walk away and be done. Absolutely. So we have to, what? You got to go, Jeff?
I found when you get them back, you don't have any more bitterness.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Jeff Poe theology right there, right? No.
I don't think that's supposed to be about the mating of different animals, was it?
No, our little pet grudges, our holding on to things, this is it's a major, major issue. And so look at a couple of scriptures here. So Matthew 5, 21, 22. Let's read that. Someone read that, Matthew 5, 21, 22. It's always good to go to what Jesus has to say about things like this, because Jesus gets to the what? The heart of the matter, right? So who's got that? Matthew 5, 21, 22. Okay, Matt.
Let me get there. Matthew 5.
Yep.
This is moving fast tonight, including my finger.
The first book.
Yeah. Well, that's right. It's right after.
Okay, there goes the grudge.
Yeah, don't be bitter now.
The word that it was said to those of old, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment." And 22.
22, yep.
See, I can't even read. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to the judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire.
Now, we know Jesus does this throughout the Sermon on the Mount, doesn't he? When he gets to the heart of these matters, he gets to what really is eating away. And so, before you're ever going to murder, you're going to have hatred in your heart. Before you're ever going to lust, we know he'll go on to talk about, or to commit adultery, you're going to lust in your heart, right? He gets to these heart issues. And here, it's the same thing. This is where it begins. This animosity, this festering, this bitterness, this anger, this hatred that starts in our hearts. And Jesus and God was addressing that. Again, look at Mark 7. We're not going to read the whole verses that follow, but Mark 7 and verse 23. Jesus here says, Mark 7. If you back up and get verse 20, actually, what comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Then he lists some of them: sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, folly. All of these evils come from inside and defile a person. And so Jesus gets to the very source of all sin, which is the heart. And that's where this certainly is. Bitterness always has to be looked at. It's you don't just look at the outward manifestation. Again, you may not punch somebody in the face. You may not hopefully go up and murder them. But Jesus says there's a lot of ways you can murder your brother. You can murder someone, so to speak. What? You can hold what in your heart? You hold hatred, which will, of course, fester with what? What Ephesians 4 say? It's a catch-all. What? Get rid of all what? All of everything. Bitter, malice, hatred, all of that. It stays in our heart. And Jesus says that is what causes those outward manifestations. And so this is a hard, hard thing that we have to think about. This is the nature of bitterness, and it's an inside matter. And the problem is often nobody else can really see that truly except us. I mean, others may see it, of course, manifested in how we act and treat others at times, but you can hold on to a very secretive what? Grudge and bitterness. I mean, I've seen them in the church where I didn't know something was going on between two members for a long time, and finally it came out that this person has had this grudge against this person, and I'm going, I did not know that. But you can keep that what? Buried deep in resentment and animosity, and eventually it's going to come out. But it is very, very tough, and so it's a very serious thing. Now look here, the seriousness of it. Look at the gravity here. Let's go back to Leviticus. Do you know in Leviticus 19, we have a very famous quote from Jesus that comes out of Leviticus 19. Can you take a guess what that quote is from Jesus? It's a very important command. One of the. Love the Lord your God. Okay, you're right on the right track. Now we need to add to it. Well, yeah, you'll keep my commandments, of course. But here he's going to what? If you love your neighbor as yourself. That comes right out of Leviticus 19. So look at the context here again in Leviticus 19. It is, if you back up, of course, look at how he starts in verse 2. Be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. And then he's going to 15 times repeat that phrase. So when he's going to talk about don't cheat your neighbor, don't bear false witness against your neighbor, don't have your neighbor's wife, don't have your scales that are out of balance when it comes to the marketplace. All these things he's going to keep coming back to. You don't do this because of who, what? I am. And what was Israel supposed to be a reflection of? The I am. They were to, on the earth, were to be that what? Representative of Yahweh. They were to model Him. They were to reflect Him. And it's the very character of God. And so when a person harbors bitterness and resentment and these sort of things, it is out of character of who? Of the nature of who? Of God. And where do we see the ultimate example? I mean, God on the cross, right? He's being poured out for the sins of others and taking all the hatred and the bitterness and the sin and he says that that's where I'll draw people to me when I'm lifted up. And so it's out of, when we act like the world, when we respond like the world, when we think like the world, Dolores mentioned these are very human emotions, but we're not given permission from God to foster them, to cultivate these, to nurture and grow them, because what if we say he described it as bitterness is like a what? A root. And so you can't help feeling at times when you feel wronged and angry, and those are raw emotions, but what we don't do is we don't water it. We don't what? Cultivate it. We don't fertilize it. We don't what? Don't feed it. We don't feed it. And that's hard. But that's a critical point here. And by the way, again, who we put ourselves around, how important is that then? Because other people can what? Influence. They can do. We may not directly, even if we want to kind of stop watering, somebody around us might what? Keep watering it and cultivating that and keep feeding that and encouraging that. And maybe they themselves are often, because they have bitterness towards somebody or something and they resent. Well, they don't want you to forgive, right? It's kind of hard to run around with someone if they're forgiving, but you're not, right? So, you see how that works? Yeah, somebody else say, yeah, Jeff?
Yeah, and I've been a member of the church all my life. And, I have seen the place that I've noticed the most bitterness has been within the church. It is the funniest thing is that, I've seen a couple of my neighbors have some bitterness, but
Right.
in the church, several times in my life, I've seen an outburst
Yeah.
of bitterness, during worship even.
Ah.
It's like, it's hard to believe
Yeah.
that
Yeah, and obviously it was a problem in the first century, because James is talking about you commit murder. Now, they weren't murdering each other physically in the church, but they were hating each other. What do we know what was going on at Corinth? We know what was going on in other places at times. There was strife, there was discord, there was tension, there was conflict, and probably no doubt outbursts and arguments. And the Bible talks about that often, about what does Paul tell Timothy? You don't get caught up in that kind of what? Strife of what? Arguing and being contentious. And again, it's a fine line because often we'll wrap it in self-righteousness and say, well, I'm speaking the truth. Robert, I'm telling the truth, right? And we can do that, and Satan can say, yeah, you just keep telling yourself that. All the while you sow disharmony with your truth. And Jesus, did anybody, by the way, speak more truth than Jesus on the earth? No. Now, the Pharisees, because of their hardness of heart, would not accept it. And as a result, Jesus and the Pharisees didn't always what? Matter of fact, what did they do to him, ultimately? They killed him. But Jesus made every effort to what? What did I say Sunday morning with the image of Ruth? Like a mother hen, what? Jesus said, I've what? I've tried to call you. I've tried to call out to you. But you were what? Unwilling. Yeah, Matt?
Well, that's the whole point of Matthew 18, though, is to ward that off.
Yeah.
You know, all that strife. The problem is it's amazing how you can't get, I'll just use grown men.
Right.
You can't get grown men to do it. They'll sit around and they'll bellyache about each other, but they won't go talk to each other.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And built in within the Leviticus passage, I mean, let's go back to this passage. He says here, what's he say in verse 17? Do not hate a fellow Israelite in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you will not share in his guilt. And as Matt mentions, Jesus, in Matthew 18, there's a solution, there's a source, there's a way to handle these things, and it's not to hold bitterness in your heart and resentment and grudging. It's to, in love, go to your brother, your sister, and talk to them and try to express your feelings and your thoughts. And if you've been wrong, and sometimes when we do that, often is the case, I have found out to be the case, that person did not intend, did not know that what they've done was. Now, I understand there's a lot of times they did intend and they did know what they were doing, but I've found oftentimes they didn't. Then they said, I had no idea. That really hurt them. That really was yeah, they're pretty upset, or they, maybe they've, and so, sometimes it's because we haven't went. I heard the old preachers used to say, back when people came forward, which that was just I understand that's not, you don't have to come forward. That's not, God didn't put that in the biblical, you have to walk an aisle. But the old preachers would sometimes say, brethren, instead of coming down the aisle, some of you need to go across the aisle. And you need to do what? What Jesus said in Matthew 5, leave your what? Hello? Leave your gift at the altar and go be what? Make it right with your brother and sister. And I've heard a few stories from some old-timers. Now, I better quit calling these older preachers old-timers, because in a couple of years, you know what I'm going to be? An old-timer. But right now, I'm not, so I'm going to call them old-timers. But yeah, Matt Miller, watch it now. I don't want no grudge to come at my heart, call me an old-timer. But I heard these older preachers say they had churches that it was so bad, I mean, like, hey, we're not going to preach until we get this figured out. Church is not going to continue until we resolve this conflict. And that's truly in spirit of what Jesus says. And so it gives us the seriousness of it by saying this goes against I am the Lord. Have you ever thought about this? When we do this, when we are bitter and resentful and hold a grudge and all these things, we are becoming less than our best. We are becoming less than being in the image of God. I mean, God wants us to what? Reflect His what? His glory, His image. And when we do these things, we are far from our best. We are far from being anything that reflects God. And that's the irony of this. It makes us very, very ugly. It makes us very, very warped, and it twists us. We were not designed to live with ill will. You talk about something being optimal, the maximum, right? We think about something performing and working at its best. What are we designed? We are designed for relationships that are in harmony with each other, right? And when they're not, we're no good. We're just no good. And you've probably seen some people, maybe at times in your life, I know has as well for me, that I was no good. I need to drink a little water there. But let me listen to this. I'll give you this quote. We got to get moving here. Nelson Mandela, and I'm not endorsing all things that Nelson Mandela ever said or done, but you talk about if a person had some, from a human perspective, right to be bitter. I mean, the apartheid and the racism that was taking place in South Africa during his time, he was imprisoned. Look what he said later on. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. I thought that was pretty good. It's not going to work that way. You're only going to poison yourself, and in that regard. And so, the solution is to love your neighbor. We just out of time here. Let me get a couple of things here. The solution, is to love your neighbor. It's not enough to you can't just get rid of something bad, because there's no such thing as an empty vacuum. There's no thing as an empty space. You've got to get rid of something and empty the bitterness, but you've got to fill it in with what? Something good. And the good is to love like Christ. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love as I have loved you. Matter of fact, there in Ephesians 4, what's it say? Forgiving one another as what? As Christ has what? Forgiven us. And so He's the model. He's the one we have to reflect and love like He loved, and learn to forgive like He forgave. Now again, that doesn't mean that we're going to be always reconciled. It doesn't mean that we're going to, the relationship, because to be reconciled, you got to have two people. Both of them have to be want to have the relationship restored. So we're not talking about consequences. We're not saying that you have to put yourself in a vulnerable spot to be hurt and abused by someone. I'm not saying that. But you have to get rid of that and forgive in your heart.
Paul writes that as far as it depends on us,
Yes.
we must be at peace with all people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me give you this. I want to run to this quote here, and I want to come back to a couple of thought questions here. Miroslav Volf was a Yugoslavian. Was a Yugoslavian theologian. In the 80s and 90s, Yugoslavia, I don't know if you remember, it was a country that was they were killing each other. It was ethnic wars. You had Muslims, you had Roman Catholics, you had Orthodox, you had atheists. They were just slaughtering each other. And Miroslav Volf was a part of that. Listen to what he says. Often, victims don't even entertain the possibility that intertwined as the lives of offenders and victims are, they may have in some measure contributed to the offender's misdeed. Instead, they contemptuously place offenders in the exclusive category of wrongdoers, from which they conveniently exempt themselves. And then look what he says. God alone is completely good. Here's the takeaway. All of us forgive as sinners, not as the righteous. We are all what? Sinners. Let's use his words. At times, are we offenders? Do we offend people? Do we do things and say things and act in ways that hurt people? Yes, we are. It's funny how we want to always minimize our action, right? When we've done wrong and hurt, and we want everyone to give grace to us, but then when it's our turn, what? It's hard to then give grace when we've been wronged. And yet, Volf says, we don't forgive as righteous, we forgive as sinners. And I think that's an important distinction that we need to have sometimes, because people can have that on their shoulder, that chip on their shoulder, and they don't even want to look at the fact of what have I contributed. And so a couple of questions here. That was kind of the thought questions. What are some sources of bitterness you struggle with? I'll tell you one that's a big one for maybe a lot of us at times. It's family. I mean, family can contribute to great bitterness, can't they? Sometimes they can be the hardest to what? Forgive. Others, you have anything else come to mind? If you want to even share something, not maybe about your family, but other sources of bitterness that maybe you've struggled with, or things that you think, boy, that one's been hard. Anything that comes to mind that you think about? Someone's harmed you, okay, yeah, personally harmed you and wronged you, and yeah, really hard.
Well, I've seen situations where they would be bitter with a boss because someone else, wronged them, and they were bitter with the boss because he didn't stop them
Right.
from doing it.
Yeah, mad at somebody else.
He didn't even know it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just all sorts of sources that can contribute to this. And so, look here. Rather than being a root of bitterness, Hebrews 12 tells us to strive for peace. That's what Dolores was mentioning. There has to be some concrete ways we can do this. In our jobs, in our family, ways that we can strive for peace. And sometimes, you know what that may mean sometimes? We're not going to talk about it. You remember I preached a sermon? Several people commented after I preached on it. I was talking about unity and getting along and our opinions. And one of the points I made was kind of summarizing Paul's point there in Romans. Was he said, keep your opinions to yourself. Because what often happens when I start expressing all of my opinions? When somebody doesn't share what? The same opinions, now what starts happening often? Arguments and bitterness. Because what? Well, he don't agree with me. She don't agree. How can they believe that? How can she think that? And you can start, and so, one of the ways we might contribute that in a concrete way is to zip it. Zip it. Have you ever been at family gatherings, and maybe it's usually mom or grandma that has to say what? That's enough of that, right? We're not, and it can be ball games, politics, whatever, religion. And I'm not saying avoid difficult discussions or truth. I'm not saying that. But what are some concrete ways? I want you to think about that. And then, if forgiveness is the ultimate solution to bitterness, why do we struggle? Why do we find it difficult to forgive others as Christ forgave us? Any thoughts on that? Why do we struggle with that? Why is that hard? Pride, okay, we talked about that last week. We talked about pride last week. What else? They don't care.
That they've hurt someone.
Yeah, we think they're getting away with it, right? Yeah, they're getting away with it. Yeah, go ahead, Sherry. Creeps back. Yeah, it's hard. Forgive as Christ forgive. It's hard. It really is. And so this is what, again, so fixated on the offender's sin, we don't see our own sinfulness often, don't we? And so what does Paul say often when he says, if a brother's caught in sin, you who are spiritual, first look at your own what? What did Jesus say even? Don't try to be getting the what? And you've got. We're often, that's what Yaroslav was saying, was we often forget that. And we just want to see ourselves as always the victim and the person is always the offender. And so I think this is the key on this as well. So yeah, it's a hard one, but we've got to do it if we're going to reflect God, who is the Lord God. And so, all right, we'll pick up there on past time. So happy Valentine's.
We'll join the everlasting song and crown Him Lord of all. We'll join the everlasting song and crown Him Lord of all. This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. They're all expecting me, and that's one thing I know. My Savior pardoned me, and now I onward go. I know He'll take me through, though I am weak and poor, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Just up in glory land we'll live eternally. The saints on every hand are shouting victory. Their song of sweetest praise drifts back from heaven's shore, and I can feel it. Jesus, my Savior.